Thailand finds itself amid the 12th military coup to grip the country since 1932, when it became a constitutional monarchy. It comes after months of conflict pitting the red shirts against the yellow shirts. And joining us now to explain these factions, the clout of the Thai military, and what might next befall Thailand, we welcome, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Sinpeng. She is a political science instructor at the University of British Columbia and a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Political Science at McGill University. And it's good to have you on the line from British Columbia. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We are going to start first by looking at a map of Southeast Asia to situate Thailand in our discussion today. And once the map is up and going, we will then show a series of pictures which remind people that this country of 67 million people has a significant military presence in the streets now, although by some other pictures, as we'll see, life does go on. So let's start with this. This past Tuesday, Thailand declared military martial law, The excuse given was to keep peace and order. But then yesterday, this became a full-fledged coup. What do you think the reason is for this escalation?
The martial law, in my view, in effect, was a military takeover. I think the question is not whether there was a coup in Thailand. The question should have been who was in control of the country, and that was the military. The point of martial law was to make sure the military was in charge of running the country and not the government. So that the fact that there was a coup a few days after was in many ways a natural progression of what the martial law was.
Does the military, in fact, have legal standing to do this kind of thing in Thailand?
The military can declare martial law when they felt that the country was under serious threat of chaos or war, and in their mind that they used that to justify their ability to impose martial law and restriction of freedom of expression and civil rights to impose peace and order in the country. I think what's interesting about this coup is that normally in Thailand, even though there had been many coups, the military tend to stage the coup first, then impose martial law. But in this case, they imposed martial law and then followed up very quickly with a coup d'etat. But in my mind, and for many people living in Thailand, the martial law was, in effect, a coup d'etat.
Have you been able to satisfy in your own mind whether or not you thought that the coup d'etat was a legitimate expression of military power?
The military is very, very powerful in Thailand and has been for a long time. And I think it's important to understand that unlike other countries, particularly in Latin America, if some people would be interested in Latin America, there had been many coups in the past, but no longer is the case. And I think in Thailand, unlike other countries, the military has never come under full control of civilian government at any point in time. A threat of a coup or military engagement in politics is constant and an issue always for political leaders in Thailand. So I think whenever there's a serious signs of political conflict that is likely to prolong for a long time, there tends to be rumors of a coup d'etat in Thailand, and people are not surprised when there is one.
Well, that's quite right. I mean, you can do the math here, and since it became a constitutional monarchy in 1932, there have been 12, and that's clearly more than one a decade. So is the sense in Thailand that, yes, we've seen this movie before and this is not such a huge deal?
There had been 19 coup attempts and 2 successful coups in Thailand since the country transitioned to constitutional monarchy in 1932. However, this is really important that we understand that the recent coups in the past couple of decades are fundamentally different from previous coup d'etats in the past in 2 major ways. One, recent coups in the past 2 decades, the military tended not to wanted to stay in power. So it's no longer the case that the military would take over and stay on and turn the country into a long reign of military dictatorship. And secondly, related, the military coup in recent times is seen as a temporary fix of a political conflict. So looking forward, in the past, since the early 1990s, people have to understand that when there's a coup d'etat in Thailand, they see it as a quick fix, a way to get out of an impasse, and that the country would likely return to electoral democracy in the short future. So we're likely to see an election coming up in a short time soon. Perhaps maybe not this year, but maybe a year after, but it's not going to be the case, like in previous times in Thailand, that the military would actually stay in power for long.
Well, just to amplify on what you're saying, and Sheldon, our director, I don't know if you can bring this picture up again, but if you can bring up Thailand 4, this photo of a woman taking a selfie with soldiers in the background, which I know, Dr. Amy, you've seen before because we sent you this picture. This does not look like a woman who is terrified within an inch of her life that the military is in control. Is that a fair comment?
In 2006, when there was the previous coup, a lot of people actually came outside to the streets and actually started handing flowers to the military and the soldiers on the street. And I think this kind of picture speaks of two things. One, Thailand had often had what people are calling peaceful and bloodless coup, meaning nobody actually died on the day that the military staged a coup d'etat. So it's quite bloodless, for one. And secondly, and this is really important, is that when people think of a coup, perhaps in other countries, they tend to assume that it's a bad thing. In fact, a coup d'etat in Thailand tends to elicit mixed emotions among Thai people. Some people, perhaps, they support the opposition movement and they actually want the military to step in and intervene, would be quite happy to see these soldiers and onto the streets. They feel safer. They feel that things perhaps could get back to normalcy. And for some other people, it was disappointing. They did not want to see the military back in power. And so a coup d'etat often elicit mixed feelings from the people on the ground.
Let's just understand, as we suggested in the intro, who the two sides are. You've got people with nicknames of different color shirts here, the red shirts and the yellow shirts. What's the difference?
So there's actually four key major groups. Two of them are related. The first group is the Democrat Party. That's the second most popular party in Thailand and it's the main opposition party. The Democrat now has its own grassroots movement that has joined up with former members of the Yellow Shirt to form a loosely aligned opposition movement called the People's Democratic Reform Committee, the PDRC. So this movement had been out in protest since the summer of 2013. So the Democrat Party is a political party of the opposition movement, the PDRC. The other two groups, first is the ruling party, Pheu Thai. Pheu Thai was formerly aligned with Thaksin Shinawatra, who was ousted from a coup d'etat in 2006. Right, up until recently, his sister Yingluck Shinawatra was the leader of the party and was running the government, a majority government, through Pheu Thai party since 2011. Its own grassroots movement, the Red Shirts movement, support the government. So we're looking at a situation of two major political parties at war with each other, Pheu Thai and Democrat Party, and two grassroots movements at war with each other, Red Shirt movement and the PDRC movement that's formerly aligned with the Yellow Shirt movement. So there are four different key groups.
Interesting. And is the military seen as a genuinely neutral, honest broker among them all?
It depends who you ask. I believe if we look back in 2011, there had been public announcement by figures inside the military that had asked the people to vote carefully and to vote for moral and good people during the election campaign. So some observers have interpreted as a way for the military to quietly but also publicly support people to vote for the Democrat Party. In the past couple of years, the military tried its best to portray themselves as a neutral institution that's concerned about preserving the monarchical institution, but also preserving order in the country. But in the recent weeks leading up to the martial law, the army in particular has stepped up its stance and actually had said publicly, the army chief a few times, that they would be willing to use force and increase security measures to ensure that Thailand could maintain its order. That was a lead up, almost a sign that the military is willing to be more assertive and stepping up, leading up to the martial law declaration.
Now, I gather the protests have really been more dramatic over the past 6 months or so, but I wonder what was the spark that sort of started the most recent unrest that led to the military getting involved?
In the summer of 2013, the majority government under the leadership of Pheu Thai Party and Yingluck Shinawatra, tried to pass amnesty bill. And this amnesty bill was seen by the opposition as a way to vindicate her brother Thaksin Shinawatra, who was ousted from power in 2006, and bring him back. And Thaksin was a very polarizing leader. Many people loved him, but also many people really loathed him. And so that really prompted a more large-scale mobilization of various groups of opposition to protest against the passage of the amnesty bill. The government quickly retracted and said that they weren't going to go ahead and do it, but it was already too late because it gave an ammunition for the Democrat Party, who was looking for a way to regain some of their power. They hadn't won an election since 1992, and to actually strengthen their own grassroots movement, the PDRC. So they had been ramping up their protest rallies since then, and that had been wreaking havoc, especially in Bangkok, for the following 7 months.
Let me read something that was in the Japan Times not too long ago, just a few days ago or so, which talks about the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister now, this way. Every time soldiers step up to restore order in the short run, they set back Thai democracy in the long run. No matter how distasteful Thaksin and his ilk may be, the way to get rid of them is at the ballot box. In trying to destroy him in other ways, protesters are also steadily destroying the credibility of the courts, trampling on human rights, driving the nation to the verge of civil war, and putting Thailand Inc. out of business. The only way out of this is free and fair elections and respect for the outcome. What do you think of that?
I think I think that there is two issues to be raised on this. One, is a coup d'etat bad for business? And the question is not, the answer is not straightforward, because throughout Thailand history, there had been a number of periods of military rule or authoritarian governments where business was doing well. And in that sense, business looked for stability. Business looked for stability in terms of policy and economic terms. And Thailand had been fairly good under democratic or undemocratic governments to ensure that they are really interested in making sure and keeping foreign investment around, that business will go on as usual, regardless of the type of government in power. However, what really hurt business prospects in the long run is the uncertainty over, first, the ability of government of the state to actually control situations on the ground, especially when there's a lot of protests going on, and secondly, how long are the protests going to drag on in this political climate? So I think when we look at that, with that statement, we have to understand, is coup necessarily bad for business generally, or whether more so the case is the lack of certainty about whether whoever's in power at a particular time can actually keep the country in order. And I think there is a real concern among business people and also potential investor at this time, whether or not the current makeup of government or whoever is running the country at that time could actually control the situation.
Okay,
and
but
this is something that we have to be worried about.
I hear you, but that's business. Do you not worry that your country, or not your country, but do you not worry that Thailand looks like a bit of a banana republic with all of these different coups, and it looks like a bit of a junior league democracy at the moment? Are you worried about that?
Certainly, clearly democracy is not working for some people in the country. And I think anytime there's a coup in Thailand, regardless of how bloody it is, people forget that it is a violent act. A coup d'etat is a force, is essentially taking power by force, regardless of whether or not there's actually any debts related directly to the coup. So in many ways, a coup d'etat is many steps back for Thailand in terms of its democratic development.
Having said that, the Shinawatras, both brother and sister, both of whom have been prime minister, from everything I read, they're pretty corrupt. Do you think the military had to come in and get rid of them because they had overdone it?
I think corruption with political leader is almost a constant issue in Thailand and many developing democracies around the world. How do we hold political elites accountable? And especially under majority government, how do you hold anyone accountable if you don't feel that you have the voice? I think what the opposition movement and to some extent opposition political leaders are really looking for is a way to make sure that the minority voices are respected in some ways. And so with the idea of, the reason why the opposition movement is looking for reform before election, which is their main campaign, is for one thing, they realize that their opposition party cannot win an election because the Shinawatra family is quite popular and they've been really successful in running a political party. So for them it was, how do we get power without actually, if we can win an election? So that's one thing. But another thing, and I think this underlines certain issues of people for why they wanted to join the opposition movement, is that they wanted to be able to have an option. They felt that for every, for so many elections in the past now, a party aligned with Thaksin Shinawatra has been winning, and that there was no other option. There was no other option for them, and so they felt that their voices are not getting heard. And so how do we reconcile majority rule, which is the more normal conception of what people understand as democracy, with how do we also respect minorities? And in Thailand's case, it's a very powerful minority. A lot of the people that join the opposition movement are drawn from the middle class. Many are educated. Many people have the certain level of income that would be upper middle class and so forth. But they feel that they are majority in this country, and so they're trying to look for a kind of reform in the political system that would also empower their own voices as well.
One player in all of this we haven't talked about yet that we should talk about is the king. He's 86 years old. Is he still influential?
The monarchical institution in Thailand is one of the most powerful in the country, and for many is the symbol of the nation, is the standard of moral high ground. And so anytime there is a political conflict in Thailand, it often gets involved with the monarchy in the sense of how do we get people out onto the streets. So one of the ammunition that opposition movement has been using as to frame their mobilization tactics around saving the nation and saving the monarchy, because it evokes certain kind of emotions among people, especially conservative people who grew up most of their lives with the one king. So they really felt that unless the country is rid of the Shinawatra family in some ways, that the monarchy is under serious threat. And so they come out on the street and they come out and support the opposition movement. So in that sense, the monarchy is the most important institution for many Thai people, and it tends to actually get people out on the street if they do believe that the monarchy is under serious threat.
One of the reasons I guess we are doing this story tonight, and this story on this subject on this program, is that on Fridays people go to our website and they vote for what story they want us to do. And they wanted us to do this probably because there's a great deal of interest in Thailand in Canada, a lot of tourism. People come here, people from here go there. And I wonder what you think. What's this going to do to tourism in Thailand? What's this going to do to the economy in Thailand? What are your concerns on that?
The martial law was imposed nationwide, even though the majority of the problem actually is concentrated in Bangkok. So for tourism purposes, I would say that if you're traveling outside of Bangkok, you might fly into Bangkok, but you're going elsewhere, the beach or the mountains up north, things should be okay as normal. And so people in Thailand are actually quite used to living under curfew. There had been many in the past few years alone that it didn't really affect their day-to-day life. But I would also look out for travel advisory warning, particularly when there's a warning or a suggestion within Thailand that there might be some mass protests onto the streets. But this tends to concentrate it in Thailand. So if you're traveling outside, concentrate in Bangkok. So if you're traveling outside Bangkok, things should be fine as normal. In terms of the economy, I think the ongoing protests could really wear out investors' confidence. Right now, I believe that a lot of investment is in this waiting to see period about what's going on, who's going to be in the government, and what's the direction's going to be. But I think generally it may not immediately affect the overall economy more than it already did. So the first quarter of Thailand was marred by significant protests that had already decreased the projection of a GDP growth. And I think it should hover around that, that level of percentage. I believe the figure was that it would go down by 0.6%. So I don't think it would get much worse than that. And that's mostly a result of protests and not the coup.
Understood. Dr. Im, I think we know a lot more about this now than we did 20 minutes ago. So thank you so much for coming on TVO tonight and helping us out.
Thank you.
That's Dr. Im Sinpeng. She's an instructor of political science at UBC and a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Political Science at McGill University.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.